Life is different when there is change or transformation or crisis or tragedy. We see things differently. When life is filled with change and with transformation and crisis and tragedy, we begin to see the things that really matter. Maybe the things that matter in moments like that seem lost to us, or maybe those are the only things that are left. This is, as I said, the 6th Sunday of Easter. And it is a spiritual preparation for what's going to be marked on the calendar as Ascension Day on Thursday. This sense that Jesus ascends back to God, he will be truly felt as absent among his friends. And to experience that absence of God, that risen Lord now leaving, must have felt, yes, like change, like transformation, like crisis, but thank God, not tragedy. That already happened on the cross. But still, to have a sense that Jesus will be leaving, his risen glory no longer instantly available to his friends, must have been a shock to their system. Well, John's Gospel allows us to imagine again what it would have been like for the friends of Jesus to face the leaving of Jesus from their presence. John's Gospel invites us to see differently. And as John's Gospel tries to bring into our awareness again and again seeing differently, here is what John's Gospel wants us to trust. That God is saturating creation and God's presence in our lives makes a difference. God's presence makes a difference, doesn't it, when we face change or transformation or crisis or tragedy? You hear stories from people who tell you, I felt God was with me when my life was really low. I felt God was present to me, enfolding me, holding me close. I felt God's peace when tragedy struck my life, when I felt hopeless. You know, God's presence makes all the difference. Well, in the gospel text, we get this sense, well, that it's Jesus who initiates relationship with God. This very presence of God in the flesh. He comes to his friends. He comes to broken, hurting people. He comes to complete strangers and says, follow me. And how can you pass up such an experience of God in the flesh there waiting to encounter you? But this Jesus, crucified and risen, he's leaving. So how can friends of Jesus imagine life beyond that? Imagine a life where presence is slipping away. How are these people going to continue being together? How are they going to sustain their relationships if the reason for their relationship is leaving? Jesus says, I'm sending an advocate. I'm sending the Spirit of God to you when I go. And the words that we hear today are words that Jesus shares the night before he died, that really the first version of goodbye that he had to share with his friends. He says, I'm sending you this Spirit to help you be community, be family, be together, be friends united in this vision that God is everywhere. God is with his creation and loves it. You see, if Jesus inspires relationships, he's going to find a way to keep them going. Power of the Spirit of God does that. I want to share with you three things about the Spirit that is to come into the life of the church, and this, I find, is alive and well today. Three things. Jesus says the Spirit creates and sustains community. It's important to know if he's leaving. Jesus says that the Spirit is going to teach the community everything it needs to know. Good to know. And Jesus says that the Spirit is going to remind the community of what Jesus said, in case we forget. So those three things. The Spirit creates and sustains community. The Spirit will teach us everything. And the Spirit will remind us of what Jesus has taught. Well, this first thing builds upon where we've been journeying the last few weeks of Eastertide. The Spirit sustains and creates community. Jesus says on the night before he dies, the same night that we hear from John's text, Jesus says, I give you a new commandment. I want you to love one another. Now, for starters, it means here in this community Jesus faces at the Last Supper, he says, I want y'all to love one another. We imagine that the love we need to share with the world is a cosmic love, an all-encompassing love. Yes, that's true. But we start by love in community. The love in community that Jesus shapes. And throughout the centuries, it is the Spirit of God that keeps building up that community. That's easy to miss. We think church is about joining an organization or entering into relationship with an institution. But before we talk about that, we talk about community founded first by Jesus. Love one another. How far does the love go? Is it going to go to the neighbors that we know? To those we like? To those who are like us? Does the vision of the gospel of God keep enticing the people of God to go further, to expand that sense of love? Yes, it does. We who know the story 2,000 years later, we know that the Spirit of God has been reaching out to male and female, Jew and Greek, slave and free, gay and straight, rich and poor, educated, not so educated, different cultures, experiences, races, different times, different everything. The Spirit of God brings all of these disparate threads together, these different tribes that seem to not want to look at each other. And Jesus says, love one another. That's the kind of community Jesus creates. That's the kind of community the Spirit helps to create and sustain generation after generation. That sounds crazy. That sounds impossible. But it is utterly crucial. It is there at the white-hot center of that command. Love one another. It encompasses all of human experience. And the Spirit is not done yet. So what the Spirit creates and sustains, the Spirit will keep on doing. And especially when there is, in life, in the church, in personal things, in national and worldwide things, when there is crisis, I should say, change, challenge, transformation, tragedy, when all of those things fall upon us. Come back to this truth. The Spirit of God creates and sustains the community we need to love one another. Central, basic thing. Quite apart from, or in addition to, and on top of the Spirit creating and sustaining us as community, the Spirit teaches us everything that we need to know. Now, as a member of the Anglican tradition, I love to hear that. The Spirit of God teaches us everything that we will need to know. We don't need to have a rigid sense of our faith. We do not need to have a sense that we have all of the answers. We do not need to have any sense that we are following the rules that God is giving us, and if you don't follow it, you're out. And we're in. That's not what this is about. Humility comes when Jesus says, after I leave, the Spirit will come to recreate and sustain this community, and that same Spirit will teach you everything you need to know. Because right now you don't. In my life, as a Christian, you know how that comes out? You know how I know that I don't know everything? Because I have experiences with fellow people, fellow human beings, who have problems I can't even imagine, who have challenges I didn't even know were possible, who face crises that I didn't think were ever going to hit anyone I knew. And then there's the change in life that comes to all of us just because we're alive. And I ask myself, God, how am I supposed to relate to this person in front of me who is suffering, who is going through change, who is in crisis, who is experiencing tragedy? How do I follow you in crisis and change and challenge and tragedy and transformation? Spirit of God, I'm teachable now. That's the prayer. Spirit of God, I'm willing to learn, because I don't know everything. In fact, I don't think I know much at all, but I know that I can trust you, Spirit of God. So that's how the church learns, isn't it? We learn through this experience of life together. And in the life that we have together, we have challenge, and we've got change, and we've got crisis. And so does the world. And then life just keeps developing and unfolding and blooming. In this Episcopal Church, we are thrilled to savor the ministry and embrace the ministry of women as deacons and priests and bishops. We are thrilled to be able to offer an expansive welcome to God's table. We are more alive because we accept folks regardless of who they love. There are some branches of the Church of God that aren't quite there. That's okay. Because the Spirit of God teaches us everything we need to know. We learn because the Spirit teaches us in the lives and faces of our neighbors. So this Spirit of God, which creates and sustains community, says, you know, I've got something to teach you. I hope you're teachable. And so the Church of God carries on age through age, learning and going forward and understanding that the Spirit of God motivates everything. Wow, good news, church! The Spirit of God, the same Spirit that Jesus promises before he leaves, that same Spirit is with us, teaching us everything we need to know. Very often, folks who don't really care for progressive Christianity will say, you're just kowtowing to popular culture. You're caving into the demands of people who have no real investment in the gospel. They don't like what they hear. So I will say to that if we don't get out into the world and invite it to experience the living Christ, then, friends, I'm not sure who we're talking to. I'm not sure if we are inviting the Spirit, if we do not reach out to the world around us, even a world that may be indeed hostile to what we have to say, to the life we want to offer, the life that says God is everywhere and loves everyone. So what does the church do? In the midst of its Spirit-led life, the same church returns back to the words of Jesus. So that's item number 3. Knowing that the Spirit creates and sustains our community, and then knowing that the Spirit will teach us everything, we then trust that the Spirit will bring us back into a knowledge of the words and the teachings and the actions of Jesus, and will resurrect them. Have you noticed how many times throughout the life of the church people have said, oh, this version of Christianity, it's hardly Christianity at all. You hear Christians say that all the time. Oh, those people over there, the way they worship, the people they invite, the way that their leaders act, those aren't Christians. Well, that needs to be tested by the wisdom of the Spirit. So we must come back to the words of the Holy Spirit that guides us and transforms us. Especially in those times when times are tough, we must come back to the words of Jesus. Love one another. Keep doing that, says Jesus. Return back to my words. Reflect upon them. See if my love matches with the love that is being called forth from you in this broken world. Because if we're invited to love expansively and generously and sacrificially, it may well be the love of Jesus. And yes, we'll be different. This community, like every Christian community, must wonder, how do we live out our faith? Last Sunday I said to you that the first practice of the Christian faith is what Jesus says the night before he dies. Love one another. Love, that's our first practice. The next two practices are the ones that we hear today, that the Spirit accomplishes through us. When the Spirit will teach us everything that we need to know, and that the Spirit will bring us back to the words of Jesus. If the Spirit teaches us through experience and outreach and service and sacrificial giving, then we must return back to the words of Jesus to have him refresh us. Because if we enter where the Spirit of God asks us to go, we are going to go where there is challenge and crisis and change and tragedy. We will be invited into that white-hot center of where God's love burns most brightly, through the cross and the empty tomb. And then we, the self-same people who have been led by the Spirit into those experiences, must come back and reflect and be nurtured by the one who sends us out into this world. Action and reflection are the two practices that build upon love. Our first practice of love needs action and reflection in a continual dance, in a continual dynamic life. 2,000 years have passed, and the church wonders, who are we? What do we do? How are we being led? It is right there in those few words of the gospel, where the Spirit grows and creates us again and again, teaches us again and again and again. The same Spirit revives us again and again and again. This is that good news, which the first Christians were willing to die for because death had been undone by Jesus. These are the teachings of a Spirit-led church, because we trust that the one who has started us on this journey is going to make it fruitful and bring us into the kind of glory we hear in that reading from Revelation this morning. We have trust that where our lives go, no matter the crisis, no matter the tragedy, no matter the challenge, no matter the transformation, our God sustains us and recreates us. Is this good news to you? Would you rather have it any other way? Or have we found our home with God, whose love makes a dwelling, a home with us? Amen, church.